Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Ever-Changing Past, Why All History is Revisionist History, by James M. Banner, Jr., narrated by Bob Souer. Everything changes, nothing is lost. Ovid. Introduction. This book has its origin in a conversation with Justice Clarence Thomas some years ago in his Supreme Court chambers. At his invitation, a colleague and I were preparing Justice Thomas to meet with a group of teachers who were studying the origins of American constitutional government with us. In the course of a lively conversation, Justice Thomas reported that he was spending the summer reading the history of slavery and the American South. Of course, pleased, we asked him whose works he was reading. He named a number of historians, among them John W. Blassingame, John Hope Franklin, and Kenneth M. Stamp. But, he quickly added in so many words, not the revisionists. That statement alerted us, as it would all historians, to the justice's readiness, while seeking authoritative knowledge of the subjects he sought to learn about, to dismiss works of history, works that he had somewhere learned challenged what he thought should constitute and be written about the past, as not worth his attention. It also suggested his misapprehension about the ways historians have approached the past and disputed with each other over 2.5 millennia of historical thought, as well as his misunderstanding about the changing nature throughout those centuries of historical inquiry and argumentation. For in fact the works of all the authors Justice Thomas named were revisionist histories, books widely known among professional historians for having deeply altered historical understanding of American slavery, slave society, and the South. From that conversation grew my determination to try to make sense of the realities of what is known as revisionist history. This book is the result. It ought to be bracing that many people understand enough of the origins, uses, and satisfactions of historical knowledge that they engage with continuing curiosity and pleasure in the play of reasoning that is part of all historical thought, and accept with ease the provisionality of historical interpretations that are available to them. Yet it is also troubling to encounter people who dismiss substantiated historical evidence, plausible historical perspectives, and strongly argued evidence-based interpretations of the past simply because those versions of the past differ from their own, from what they think is proven and safe from challenge, or from what they dream the past ought to have been even if it never was as they imagine it. Consequently, in this book I attempt to achieve two goals. The first is to strengthen the convictions of aspiring historians in graduate school, their academic teachers, advisors, and mentors, and historians employed outside academic precincts, all of whom may benefit from considering some of the often overlooked intellectual and theoretical realities of the history of which they are the legatees, while arming them to explain those realities to others. My second goal is to explain to those in another group, the legions of general readers who take pleasure in learning about the past, the grounds on which I invite them to feel more comfortable about the surprises and complexities of the past, about what historical knowledge and arguments consist of, and about how and why professional historians go about creating and evaluating works of history in the way they do. In seeking to do both, I acknowledge the difficulties people everywhere face when asked to accept new understanding of the past and incorporate fresh interpretations into the received ways, to which they are accustomed, of thinking about earlier times. Yet I hope that this book will make clear to them that, as citizens of nations and members of society, they themselves, like millions of others before them, help to shape the way in which the past is conceived and taught. The interpretive changes and contests that I consider are not mere academic realities. Forces and developments outside scholarly circles, what social scientists call externalities, exert potent influence on what professional historians conclude about the past at all times. Historians are no more exempt from the realities of their own times than anyone else. In the modern era, historians' understanding of major subjects has almost never stood still. New views have rarely gone long without objection and challenge, and even professional historians seldom escape the struggle to keep up with new knowledge and readjust their understanding of what they think they know. If at the time of our conversation Justice Thomas was troubled by what he considered revisionist history, today he would be even more disturbed by the newly challenging and disruptive scholarship about slavery in the South that has appeared since we spoke, scholarship that places slavery and racism squarely at the center of the larger history of American capitalism, the nation's government, and some of its most illustrious institutions, North as well as South, 20th and 21st century as well as earlier. Similarly, since the 1970s, a large cohort of scholars, female, African and Latin American, and gay and lesbian, as well as white, male, and straight, have helped transform how historians think and write about most dimensions of the past. My purpose is not to defend or criticize any particular ones of these new ways of understanding historical reality, but rather to explain why such interpretations have emerged, why historians consider it normal that they do so, and why public life is never free of the very kinds of disputes and reinterpretive efforts that historians in the contemporary world consider the normal condition of their professional endeavors. But it is critically important to understand that the mission to revise understanding of the past is not, and never has been, located exclusively on either side of the political spectrum, not always on the left, as many believe, nor the right, either in the United States or elsewhere. Both liberals and conservatives have often set out to establish and protect their orthodox readings of the past, and have often, at least temporarily, won interpretive contests about it. During the mid-1990s in the United States, for example, bitter controversies caused headline-creating news about the effectiveness of Soviet espionage against the United States, national history standards, and the display of the fuselage of the iconic Enola Gay bomber in the Smithsonian Institution's National Air and Space Museum. In at least provisionally winning those battles, the right revealed that what are sometimes termed projects about the past do not originate only among left-leaning scholars. The truth is that purposeful intellectual, ideological, and political endeavors concerning the past take root across the political landscape. They also transcend the boundaries of the world of scholarship. As recent events surrounding the display of monuments celebrating the Southern Confederacy and military installations bearing Confederate generals' names attest, debates about how a society should commemorate elements of its past can evoke strong emotions and reopen deep political and cultural fissures. In an era less tolerant of white Southern defenders of slavery than in the Reconciliationist years of the early 20th century, statues of Confederate Generals Robert E. Lee and Thomas J. Stonewall Jackson are now under widespread attack, and pressure has built to remove the names of leaders of the Southern armies from military bases throughout the United States. Neither a new nor an exclusively American phenomenon, such contests over memorialization, public contests that involve debates about the meaning of the past, have spanned time and space. Take, as one non-American instance, the Iraqis' toppling of the likeness of Saddam Hussein from its pedestal in Baghdad in 2003. Moreover, destruction is not the only fate of monuments to fallen heroes. After the dissolution of the Soviet Union, Muscovites removed statues of Lenin, Stalin, and other Bolshevik and communist figures from their pedestals around the city and left them lying jumbled ignominiously together in a field until post-Soviet officials decided to integrate them into a new park of arts devoted to public sculpture. Hungarians founded their own analogous memento park in Budapest to preserve some of the statuary from Hungary's communist past. Yet even the removal and destruction of memorials sometimes fail to put an end to their history or to the controversies surrounding them. Should memorials to Lee and Jackson simply be replaced in southern city squares by those of W.E.B. Du Bois, Sojourner Truth, and Martin Luther King, Jr., whose historical stature has grown with time, or should formerly honored figures cohabit the same space with sculpted likenesses of these more recently celebrated people? Is it preferable to preserve and display sculptures of now disdained figures out of sight in museums for future educational purposes, or
Sample complete. Ready to continue?